Hello, good morning, and welcome to another One Punch Man video. So now that King has been confirmed as the next LSSR, thank God it's not Zombie Man. So now that free-to-play can actually save enough black tickets to pull him, we are going to make a review on the world's strongest man. Funny thing is, King is actually my favorite character in One Punch Man, even over Watchdog Man, just because I like his character design and how funny he is in the anime. But regardless of that, I'm not going to have any bias on his review. So let's get started. Okay, so let's start off with the pros and cons. For the pros, King is a very versatile unit. He has AoE damage, he's a team healer, he's an energy sealer, and he has a shatter debuff on his basic attack. Because of this, he can pretty much be slotted into almost any lineup in the current meta and the upcoming metas as well. He has a relatively long meta life as well. He survives until around mid-Zombie Man era, around the time when Garou comes out and he's actually well trained. When Garou originally is released, he can still be used because most Garous won't be trained to their full extent at that point, and King is still sort of viable. But once everyone starts training their Garou really well, he kind of really falls off. And of course, he is the literal king, no pun intended, of PvP for the next few months. He is a very strong PvP unit. His energy seal and heal will completely change the current meta once he's released. So if you guys want to stay relevant, especially the spenders in PvP, I highly recommend you pull him. He also pairs well with Boros in PvE bossing lineups, mainly because he's another Esper, which I will talk more about whenever I make the Boros review. And he also provides a free shatter debuff on his basic attack. So once again, I would recommend if you're spending in the game, and if you plan on building a really strong Boros for your PvE bossing lineup, you should probably pull King as well. He'll definitely fit really well into that lineup. Next, let's talk about the cons. He requires heavy investment in order to shine and survive longer in the meta. This is true for most LSSRs that will be your main damage dealer or your win condition, and King is one of them, of course. He basically needs a lot of attack gear and attack speed gear. He needs a lot of speed, because if you don't have speed, there's no point in having him as an energy sealer, since you want to seal off your opponent's energy the turn before they're able to move. And he also needs to be 5-star. If you don't have a 5-star King, he pretty much doesn't do much damage. He's just there for utility at that point. And also for the whales, you probably want to pull for his keepsake. He does get a huge boost for his team healing, as well as it also buffs up his passive, therefore giving him a lot more AoE damage. Next, he does not benefit from crit rate or the crit damage stat. We will talk about this more once I get into his skills in the next couple of slides, but just know that basically he won't benefit from crit rate or crit damage. The only stats he needs are attack and speed, basically. Early banner means free-to-play and small banners cannot pull him, which really sucks because King really is a strong unit, at least for the next upcoming months. But there are better units and more essential units that can be pulled, so it's better to not gamble our black tickets on his banner. And last, he needs to be put into extreme training, and he also shares similar resources with Tatsumaki. He also shares the Esper spot on hero side with Tatsumaki, so this will be kind of an issue for a lot of you guys who have already built a very strong Tatsumaki. It's going to be hard to slot King into your lineup, and it's also going to be harder to build him as well, since a lot of the resources will be the same as Tatsu. So if you have a well-built Tatsumaki, you might be on the fence about pulling for King. I'm not too sure. At the end of the day, it's all up to your decision as well. Okay, next slide. We get into his skills. For King's basic attack, King gazes at a single target with his King Face technique, inflicts shatter for 2 rounds, they take increased 30% damage, and heals himself for 80% of his attack. So his basic attack is basically Sonic's basic attack, except slightly better with the self-heal. His basic attack is great for bossing, providing a shatter debuff, so pretty much like I said before, fits the same role that Sonic does right now. The self-heal actually procs Dr. Genius's passive for himself and Boros, because Boros has a passive. Whenever any of your allies heal, he gets healed for a certain percentage, and this will also proc Dr. Genius's attack passive for Boros. So that is why King pairs very well with Boros, on top of the fact that he's an Esper, and Boros' passive also gives him, or I think it's his ultimate, also gives him more damage the more Espers you have on your team. But once again, I'll talk about that more in my Boros character review. And of course, this gives 1 energy if you're using Dr. Genius's core, so that's also another benefit. You don't have to put a suit or a casual set on King, unlike Sonic, who needs a suit or casual set in order to receive the healing. Next, we go into his ultimate. He stands in the middle of the battlefield and threatens all enemies. He does like this little ticking damage. It actually only does 1 AoE damage per tick, much like his basic attack too also only does 1 damage, but it does it 1 time. Unfortunately, I don't own King on my Southeast Asia server account, so I won't be able to show you the animation. But when he does come out and you do fight him in arena, you'll see that the first couple of ticks on his ultimate actually only does 1 damage. And for this specific reason, this is why he does not benefit from crit rate or crit damage. Because even if you build crit rate and crit damage, how much damage are you going to gain from critting 1 damage every turn? You're not going to get anything from crit rate or crit damage, basically. But other than that, he also seals 2 energy for the entire enemy team, and he also heals your team for 50% of his attack. If you pull his keepsake, he gets his ultra ult, and this increases his healing from 50 to 65% of his attack for his whole team. Alright, moving on. So now we take a look at his passive. This is where all of King's damage comes in. This is his most important skill. When taking action, deals 20% of his attack as extra damage to affected enemies, increased by 20% for every 1 energy you have, dealing up to 120% of his attack as extra damage. So basically, the more energy you have, the more damage he's going to deal to the opponent in the form of extra damage scaling off his attack. And for his basic passive, it goes up to 120%, so that is 6 energy will be the cap. If you have 6 energy, you'll do the maximum amount of damage to all your opponents. And unfortunately, his passive cannot crit, so that's why this is another reason why crit rate is completely useless on King. This damage can only be scaled up from his own attack percent, and Sky King's passive. That means Sky King is a very good partner or teammate in the lineup if you want to put Sky King along with King. It will definitely boost up his passive damage, which is his only way of doing damage. And next we have King's extreme passive. It goes up to 25%, and it caps out at 175% of his attack. When you get King to 5-star, you unlock this extreme passive. And 175% of his attack divided by 25 is 7 energy. So if you manage to get 7 energy before King casts either his mostly his ultimate, you don't want to use his basic attack in PvP, he will do 175% of his attack to all enemies, and that is a lot of damage compared to his regular passive. This is exactly why, if you plan on using King as your AoE damage dealer, you need to invest him to 5-star. It is an absolute must. So just to clarify all this, when it states when taking action, that means whenever King attacks, whether it's his basic attack or his ultimate, he'll be able to deal damage only with his passive, if you don't count the 1 damage tick from his ultimate or his basic attack. Okay, hopefully that clears everything up, and hopefully you guys understand why his passive is his most important skill and why all his damage output comes from his passive. Moving on, let's talk about his build. So for his gear, the recommended sets are Knight and Swordsman. Of course, obviously, we prioritize Knight because it is just a better version of Swordsman. And you want attack percent, and attack speed times 3, meaning three of the gears you have need to have speed as the substat, and one of them can have attack percent. Alternatively, you can run a Monk set because speed is extremely important on King, and just run 2 attack percents and 2 attack speeds. Of course, if you aren't able to make either of these sets, it's fine. As long as you have attack percent and a lot of attack speed gears, you can mix those together and have a broken set. That's perfectly fine. It just means your King won't be dealing as much damage or won't be as fast, but you definitely don't want to put in random gears with bad stats or lower tier gears just to make the Knight or Monk set. It's definitely not worth it. Always prioritize your main stats over sets, for the most part. Alright, next we got talent sigils. The talent system has not been released as of yet, but the sigils are already in the game and you can actually open the sigil chest and take a look at the sigils. All you need to know is the only 2 sigils that you'll need for King are going to be Sharp Sword and Vitality. Sharp Sword being the damage sigil, and it provides attack is the main stat, and at later levels you get a little bit of HP. And then for the support sigil, you want Vitality, which will give you HP and attack as the substat in the later levels. For the majority of your characters that you're building, for the most part, you'll be using Sharp Sword and Vitality a lot. I'll mention some alternatives later on when we talk about other LSSR reviews and builds, but for now, definitely go with Sharp Sword and Vitality on King. So to wrap things up, King is a very powerful PvP unit that requires heavy investment in specific gears, aka he needs a lot of attack, a lot of speed, and you need to get him to 5-star if you plan on using him as your main damage dealer. For free-to-play and small spender, he is a hard skip, save your black tickets. Even if you do have enough to pull for King as a small spender or a free-to-play, I still recommend you skip him because we don't know when Zombie Man is coming out, and if you pull King and end up pitying him, you won't be able to pull Zombie Man, and Zombie Man is meta changing. He is a must pull. So I repeat, even if you have enough tickets to pity King when his banner comes out, please do not pull him if you're a free to play or small spender. Aside from that, you also won't have enough resources to build him all the way to the max where his potential is fully unlocked. If you're a spender or a whale, you should probably pull him. He's very strong in PvP like I mentioned before, and he'll definitely fit well into your current lineup. He is countered and gutted by a well-built Garou. So, what I mean by this is, Garou in general just counters any hero unit, because he has his passive, where he does a follow-up attack on any hero unit 100% at a time when the hero unit does an action. So how he counters King is when King ults and seals 2 energy, Garou will perform a follow-up attack, and this follow-up attack actually causes internal injury to King, which will generate 2 energy for the Zombie Man core. So when King seals the 2 energy, but Garou attacks and follows up with an internal injury on him and gains the 2 energy back, then the entire point of King's energy seal is almost negated. So this is why Garou counters King. And once Garou gets fully built, that follow-up attack will probably just shred King. Maybe even, it might not one-shot him, but it'll do like around 50 to 60% of King's HP, which is absolutely insane. This is why by the time Garou is released and when the whales or spenders fully build him, King is pretty much unusable after that point. And lastly, King's energy sealing and team healing becomes less relevant / useful after the Zombie Man era. The reason for this is after the Zombie Man era, all the core units, or the cores, they grant your team 6 energy at the start of the battle. So even if King energy seal the opponent for 2 energy, they still have 4 energy left and they can cast 2 ultimates, which is more than enough to one-shot your team, or at least do a lot of damage to your team. So that just makes his energy sealing pretty much not usable after that point. And of course, there'll be better healers that are later on released, aka Zombie Man being one. Later on, you'll have Handsome on My Mask, who is another LSSR who does better healing than him as well as Gyro Core, which heals your entire team for the first 2 rounds from low HP to full HP, just from the core ability itself. So you really don't need King's ultimate to heal your team anymore after that point. Okay guys, well that's going to be it for this One Punch Man video. Even though King is my favorite character in all of One Punch Man, I unfortunately cannot recommend free-to-play and small spenders to pull for him. If you're a spender, like a heavy spender / whale, definitely go for him. He will help you win PvP for the next upcoming months, like I mentioned before. But other than that, let me know what you guys thought about this LSSR review in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next One Punch Man video. Peace!